Hey there, welcome back to the Business That Matters Spotlight. My name is Warren Coughlin, your ever-loving host. And one of the ways entrepreneurs make the world a better place is by simply raising the standards in an industry that already exists. And sometimes they do this in an industry that really matters to people. And today's guest is a perfect example of this. See, me, I'm a dog guy. I've never met a dog I didn't like. But the challenge is that dogs need care and training, and not all dogs are created the same. It is true that different breeds have different temperaments, different needs, things like that. Today's guest can help you solve all kinds of problems before they arise, or help you if you've left it maybe a little bit too long. And he's done it with a business that really raises the standards of how these kinds of trainings are offered. Andre Yeu is the founder of When Hounds Fly. He's also a great story of transitions and what happens when an entrepreneur is called. I mean, how does one go from software sales to dog training? Well, we'll soon find out. So, Andre, welcome to the Spotlight.
Warren, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Oh, I've been looking forward to it. Now, I always do this thing at the beginning of the podcast. So before we start, just in case people can't hang out for the whole time, I want to make sure they get some value. So if you were to give some advice to a young entrepreneur, not young, just a newer entrepreneur who wants to make their business have a positive impact on the world while being successful, what would you recommend?
I think creating opportunities in your business process to coach others and mentors others, to join your team, eventually maybe as an employee or a contractor or a partner, and eventually even exit and start their own business. I think that's a great thing. So that's one area that I focused on as early as I could. As soon as I had momentum, people asked about, well, I'd love to be a dog trainer. I'd love to learn about dog training, but there's so few out there. And how do you even get started? And informally, I would just start by allowing people just to hang out in the classroom and watch. And a lot of those early people who came in with very little actual direct experience working with dogs actually hung around long enough that they became people that I could hire and then eventually encourage to get more advanced training and certification and become some of my best employees. And continuing, or actually finishing that whole arc, at some point in time, they decided to actually leave our company and pursue certain niches. For example, one of my earliest mentees or apprentices now has an amazing business in Toronto where she helps people who want to train their own service dog, and that's a very specific niche that we don't do. So, creating opportunities for people to level up alongside you, to join your team, and eventually do great things. I think that's one thing I never regret doing.
Nice. And so how did you attract these people as mentees? Like, were they customers first, or were they just people who had an interest in dogs?
I would say about a third the time they were customers that did classes and just wanted to learn everything and took everything and decided to just ask, hey, could I just come out and hang out behind the scenes and learn? And then before we had formal mentorship programs, I would just give them books and DVDs, and then eventually online courses and resources to self-learn on. And then over time, that became more developed into a formal mentor-mentee program. The other sort of 2/3 would be people who already had that interest. Maybe they were dog walkers or dog daycare staff or people that were working with dogs, but wanted to get into the training aspect of it, which was sometimes a little more hard to access. And that would just be them either hearing about us from the community or just doing a good old dog training near me, Google search, and then finding and acquiring.
Now, I can hear in the back of my head some entrepreneurs going, well, wait a second. All you're doing is training up your competitors. What do you say to that?
I mean, this is the abundance mindset versus the scarcity mindset. That's and I think that I have a saying, like, I don't expect anyone on my team to be here forever. I just expect them to have a good time while they're here. And I also feel like if you have a good relationship with people, if they decide to do their own thing, they're not going to hang up a shingle next door and do the identical thing. Out of respect for the fact that you really help them and that they respect what you do, they'll often choose things that sort of deviate a couple degrees to the left or the right that really complement. And in the case of that mentee of mine, her name's Claire Kilburn, her company's Alliance Service Dogs. Like, we don't do service dogs. She does. She doesn't do pet dog training. We do. So naturally, that's an example of where you can grow the industry together, help someone out who is young, and not also lose your shirt or get burned at the same time.
Right on. Now, just before we dive into it, I'm always just interested. What's the hardest part? Is it training the dogs, training your team, or training the owners?
Oh man, it depends what quarter you ask and what current crises I have. I do think for the most part the dogs are the easiest aspect because dogs really don't have ego or they don't have emotional hangups. I mean, they have emotions, but they don't have hangups that require like putting them on the couch to ask them why. Their needs are very basic. Like they have the basic needs of safety, shelter, relationship. They want to eat food, they want to play and have fun, and they want to stay safe. I mean, that's a dog in a nutshell. But people are way more complicated than those basic fundamental needs. And that's where, for me, I think I would say that if you hire the right people from the get-go, it's easier to manage your people. If you select for the right clients from the get-go by really knowing your core client and excluding those that shouldn't come with you and sending them the right way, then the client relationship should be equally as smooth as well.
Mm. And how often does all that happen?
You know what? It's a process of continual refinement.
Yep.
And we continually learn. I think that because we've been serving clients for coming up to 15 years, we're really, really good at knowing where we can help. And when someone's needs or expectations don't match, we're better at seeing that earlier and directing those folks to where they should go. Hiring people and building teams, that is a newer skill that we developed more in the last 4 or 5 years during our rapid growth. So I would say that we're getting better at it, but we're not as strong in knowing our core clients when it comes to knowing the right kind of people that fit on our team.
Nice. So we've talked about how there's different types of training and that you do things a little bit different. So just what is When Hounds Fly? Like what do you do? Who do you do it for?
When Hounds Fly is all about helping pet dog guardians. So the people that have the dog that live in the home and are an integrated member of that family, pet dog guardians in Toronto and Vancouver rely on us to learn about behavior and training so that they have really strong relationships between all the family members, human and dog, in the household. And we know we've done a good job if those dogs stay with those owners, those guardians, for their entire natural lives and integrate every single step of the way. And how we do that, preventative is early puppy socialization classes. Our program is called Puppy Start Right, where we want the puppies in as young as 8 weeks, because at that point, early socialization can really act like an ounce of prevention versus a pound of cure to behavior issues. And then definitely investing in training lifetime so that these dogs are mentally enriched and learn skills so they fit within the urban environment that our clients live in both Toronto and Vancouver. And then the third way we help is when people end up with dogs that develop behavior issues, either because it sort of snuck up on them and appeared suddenly, or perhaps they adopted a dog that came with these issues. We do help with behavior modification to work on issues that are more severe, like fear, anxiety, or aggression problems. And by providing these services, it helps our clients achieve that mission of really strong relationships and a dog that can stay in the home for life.
And you mentioned you said urban. Is there something unique about urban dogs as opposed to rural dogs? Like, is it a different type of training or different behavioral issues that you encounter?
I think that urban living is very difficult for dogs. So the old adage of like, oh, he would do better in a country, it's true. Like a country farm or country property is true because dogs have to navigate extremely tight spaces with multiple dogs and multiple people, elevators, lobbies, condos, constant stimulation, noises. These are stressors, well, in human lives too. I mean, that's why we like getting away to the country or a cottage wherever we can to decompress. So it's very stressful for dogs to live in the urban environment, and to integrate successfully, the bar is just so much higher in terms of how resilient they are to stress, what they're socialized and normalized to, and what skills these dogs know, like walk nicely on leash, recall, stay. All these basic skills are an absolute must. Whereas in even suburban areas or definitely rural areas, a dog can actually just sort of get by without knowing any of that stuff, because how often are they going to run into crowds of people? How often are they going to have to deal with another dog that they've never met passing them on a sidewalk? They might just end up living, in their backyard and going for walks around their quiet block where they see nobody for weeks on end. So urban dogs really do have to be well socialized, and they have to know all these skills. That's why training is definitely not an option when it comes to living in Toronto or Vancouver.
Right. And then I was always curious about this. Like when I take my dog out to the country, the nose is down and there's so much, but then in the city, like dogs sort of experience the world through their nose. What's more overwhelming? Is it that like country has a ton of smells, but the urban environment must as well? Like, is there one that's more overwhelming, or are they just sort of similar but different?
I think they're just similar but different. But I mean, what you're going to smell in rural environments more is wildlife. And I think that that's really exciting. Like for dogs to be able to smell, what is that? Is that a deer? Is that a rabbit? That's pretty amazing. But in the urban environments, there's equally just as interesting smells. Like the fire hydrant that 40 dogs have peed on is like sensory, like rich, right? I mean, that might be almost like scrolling the infinite feed on Facebook, like constant stimulation. That
Sure.
fire hydrant has like 40 profiles that they're swiping through. So a dog can
analogy. That's
like a dog can have can be very stimulated in a good way in either environment.
Okay, cool. And you say in your site like over 16,000 dogs. Is that right?
Not me personally, but our team has. Although in the early days, those initial thousands were all just me because I was the first trainer. And that simply is a combination of people that have come to our group classes, those puppy start right classes, foundation skills group classes, where we serve 4 or 5 families and dogs at a time, or through one-on-one lessons. And just counting our client records, that's how many individual dogs we've served to date.
Wow, that's amazing. That's got to provide. I mean, I always say that expertise comes from pattern recognition. That's what actually is the foundation of expertise, is your ability to observe patterns and then predict what comes next. So I imagine with that depth of experience, you must do you find you're able to assess and diagnose diagnose? I mean, I don't mean that in a clinical sense, but assess what's going on with the dog really quickly.
For sure. Pattern recognition is definitely the outcome of staring at things for a long time. I mean, for me, like specifically, any experienced dog trainer can see which dog is going to cause a problem at the dog park, like long before the fight has occurred. And we often exit at the right time because we know, oh, trouble's brewing. I see all the signs that dog is eyeing that dog. It's very subtle. And if that dog doesn't do some appeasement signals, there's going to be a conflict. Let's get out of here. And then as we're leaving with my client, sometimes at the park, it's like, it's time to leave. We'll hear in the distance, rah, 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 Sparky, no, stop. Because as predicted, a fight was going to brew in the next minute or two. Or even for me too, because I've worked with a lot of aggressive dogs. I was just riding my e-scooter this morning and I saw a dog staring at me, and it's like, oh, I better go wide because that dog is going to bark and lunge at me for sure. And sure enough, even though I went wide, as I got closer, the dog was not good with an e-scooter. So I can predict which dogs when I'm running or jogging are worried about me. And because I don't want to get bit, because I've been in situations where I have been bit over doing the work, I'm super cautious when it comes to watching out for stuff like that for my own personal preservation.
That's great. I often think that parents need to train their children how to approach dogs properly. Because I often see kids just run up to dogs and it's like, that doesn't seem like a good idea.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that I think that generally speaking, people are getting better at that, especially because there's been a lot of things in the media recently about dogs and children, like really tragic situations where I'm seeing more people coach their children to say, let's ask first. Because that's really the first thing. It should be consent based. Nobody should be touched without being asked. And for dogs, that involves asking the owner, who can then say, no, my dog is not friendly. My dog is not good with kids, or sure, he loves kids. He's good with kids, and so on and so forth.
Right. And so where did the name come from?
When Hounds Fly, would play on When Pigs Fly.
Yeah.
And When Pigs Fly was the phrase that was shouted at me by a person who was driving on King Street West as he rolled down the window and shouted at me when I was working with my very first rescue dog, Duke. He was a beagle. Your beagle will be trained when pigs fly. And then he peeled off. And at that moment, I was like, I'm going to show you, just you watch. And he was my first dog as an adult. My partner and I adopted him when we were in our late 20s, and he was a handful. But I was so committed to like proving it could be done, and I feel like I did prove I did prove myself. I had to become a professional dog trainer to prove it, but I got it done.
So let's talk about that transition. So that, well, actually, I want to come to that in a second. But the last thing, like when Hounds Fly, you do group classes, you do individual classes, and one of the things I found interesting is you have online programs for people who aren't in one of the environments where you operate.
Yeah, that was born out of the pandemic. We were, during the pandemic, we were forced to pivot fast. And within a month of lockdown, we were running Zoom classes. And our students would log into Zoom at the class time, and we would watch, they would set up their laptops so we could see them training in the living room and coach and give feedback. And to enhance that experience, what we found was that it wasn't great to demonstrate live, like, hey, Mikey, come over here and me do a demo with my dog right on camera. So we actually started recording training clips at home and edited them and prepared them and packaged them so that our learning over Zoom could involve, let's watch this video together. Now you do it. And then we packaged all those videos together and now made them available as on-demand self-paced courses for people to access. And even the students that come to our brick and mortar facility really benefit from having access to that, because in the live class, while you're kind of one eye watching the instructor, one eye keeping an eye on your dog, maybe distracted by the cute dog that's next to you, they find it very helpful to go back later and do blended learning, where they can let's review what we learned in the brick and mortar class online, and then that really helps. It really helps people with retention and absorbing the information. So we've built an online platform. Most of our programs have an online equivalent, such as our Puppy Start program and our Foundation Skills program. And then another component that we really enjoy is the fact that our students can interact with us online as well, because our platform also has discussion forums so that our students can ask questions and we can answer. And other people get to benefit from hearing the question and reading our answer as well, which really allows us to be less about you see us once a week in a class and more like we're supporting you in the time that you're not in the class as well.
And that's fairly unusual. Early fire, like when I went through puppy training with a previous dog, there was none of that available.
No, I think, when I went to my first group class as a brand new owner with that new rescue dog, I was given a stack of photocopies that were stapled. And that was basically what dog training, blended learning was like, I would say up until just a few years ago. But things are really progressing, like self-paced courses, blended learning, like the industry is really embracing it. And we're really happy to be offering that these days too.
Now, one of the questions I have is there's people, especially in the urban environments, right? Like people are busy. They always talk about busy, busy, busy. And I have seen, people go to once a week puppy class, but then they don't have time to redo all the reinforcement themselves and it doesn't take, and then they kind of feel the training doesn't work and blah, blah, blah. Do you ever have people talking about can you just train my dog for me?
It's often joked like, here, you just take them and bring them back in 8 weeks and have them trained. That's something that people have asked for from the very beginning. And we're starting to embrace it as a company. Although I do have to say that it required, 14 years of changing my mind. And the reason why I changed the reason why I didn't like that model before, and I think that a lot of people knew this, is traditionally what would happen is you'd send your dog away to some place for 8 weeks, where they would be boarded 24/7 for 8 weeks, and they would come back trained. That was like dog training 1.0 long before when Hounds Fly opened. And what people would say is that, yeah, the dog would do all the behaviors and follow all the commands from the trainer that was with that dog for 8 weeks, but wouldn't listen to me when I got back because the human training wasn't done, right? The human didn't know how to handle, cue, reinforce, that is like treat, delivery, how to give toys, the body language stuff. That's a human skill that absolutely must be taught. So that's why I resisted doing services that involved training dogs for people for a long time, because I didn't want that. But with blended learning and the idea of we'll work with your dog and get it started, and then we'll meet with you periodically to do knowledge transfer and coach you on that end, that's really changed my mind. So what we're moving towards as an industry is services like day training, which is like partially do it for you, where, while guardians are busy, a trainer either goes to your home and works with your dog in their neighborhood, or you might drop your dog off for half of a day, almost like Montessori school, where our trainers will work with the dog and then give them some enrichment, and then you can come pick them up. And what we found as an industry is that, people really like that approach, because it's almost like we bake 80% of the cake and all you have to do is put it in the oven and then decorate it the way you want. It's still a good cake, and you still were part of that process and still got to bond with the dog in this case, because you're still working with that dog. But the really hard stuff at the very beginning gets done by the professionals.
Right. So are you offering that now?
We're moving towards that. We experimented with day training a few years ago, but as a company, we weren't ready for it. And there were also some design things that we did incorrectly, so I shut it down. And maybe that was one of the reasons why I was like, no, that didn't work. But my peers that I've met with, that I've talked to, it's talked about in the industry, it's really taking off. So we're really looking forward to reintegrating day training type services to help those folks that are really busy and also have the budget for as well. Because naturally, if you're paying someone to do more of the work, that does require a greater training budget for the client.
Right. And so when will you roll that out?
Well, we got quarterly planning coming up, or annual planning. And if planning goes the way I hope it does, and I get the whole team aboard, I'm hoping to really offer that in the fall. And just like back to school, if you will.
Right. Awesome. Okay. So let's talk about you. Like, how did you get into this? Like, you were a software salesperson, or did you run a software business?
I was a software salesperson, a great employee, worked really hard, tried to hit my quota every quarter, every year, went to club a number of times. That was my origin. And
so that is not a natural transition into dog training.
Not at all. And traditionally, dog trainer stories begin with, I've had dogs my entire life, ...
Right.
And then it talks about the 14 dogs they had growing up and living on the farm, or, going to kennel club shows, but that wasn't my background at all. In fact, as an immigrant, my parents moved here from Hong Kong. I was born there, but I was raised in Canada for the vast majority of my life. Immigrant families in the 80s didn't get dogs. It was very, very rare. Dogs were, dirty, a hassle, cost money. Oh no, we don't get dogs. That's not for us. So I don't think I even touched my first dog until I was in my late teens. And at the time, I was weirded out by them too. Like, oh, what is this? Like, is this dog going to bite me? My partner though, she's Japanese Canadian. She always wanted a dog growing up, but the parents said no, just like my experience in a Chinese family. But so when we finally got our own place, we bought our own place in King West Village. We got our first dog because we'd left the home and it was all about us. And that was sort of what did it. Working in tech, I had the disposable income to afford daycare, veterinary care, dog walking. I didn't worry about it financially. We had enough time to do it right. And that's when my partner Heidi and I, we adopted our first dog, Duke. He was 3-year-old rescue dog, a beagle that used to be used for hunting. He lived in the country in an outdoor kennel.
Oh, no challenges there.
No, yeah, he was cute and he's purebred. Like, Heidi, this is so rare. Let's jump on this. And we bring him in, and we're living at King Street West at Strawn, right in one of the busiest parts of downtown Toronto. And that was the beginning of all the trials and tribulations of learning how to become a responsible dog owner.
And how did it go?
Yeah, there was a honeymoon period, but after 60 days, the honeymoon period ended. We took him to a dog daycare nearby, which we thought was a good idea, but it was a really poorly run dog daycare because we didn't know any better. He ended up getting into fights all the time, to the point where we pulled him out. He developed dog aggression issues, so he became like the bad character at Trinity Bellwood's dog bowl, where people were like, "Oh no, that dog is coming," and we'd see people head for the hills. So we were really in a difficult situation. It came to a head once I wasn't there, but Heidi told me that she went to Trinity Bellwoods Park. Duke got aggressive and went after a French bulldog and actually injured it. And she was crying, and all the owners were like holding their dogs away, looking at her and our dog Duke like they were a monster. She was in tears. And that's when like we knew like we had to take this very, very, very seriously. Fortunately, though, the dog training school that we're taking classes at referred us to a great behavior consultant. She was excellent. She gave us the basic information, the framework, how to think about these problems. It's still the same like philosophy and framework that I use today. So it was the good stuff, the right stuff. And I was we were really inspired by how we were turning things around. And that Duke was integrating into King West. The aggression issues were subsiding. We got hope. That trainer, that behavior consultant who came by, who taught us a few things, got us out of a very despondent situation where we were just like, what are we going to do with this dog? It's a nightmare walking him. I don't like walking him. Into, let's go out for a walk together, Duke. Let's work on this together. We're going to get better together. Better together. And every walk we'd come back and be like, yes, we nailed it. And there's such a sense of pride that I had as a dog guardian learning that. And that's where I really learned to love the process of dog training and behavior modification. And I really wanted to help other people in our community that may have been struggling with those same things. And that ultimately was like the why behind why I opened this business. I wanted to open a school that would teach the same stuff to people in my community.
That's not, and so now how tough a transition was that? Because that's, it's one thing. So you trained in sales, which is good. That's a leg up for a lot of people in entrepreneurship. But running a business, it's not just selling it and then training the dog. Like running a business is a big deal. And so you've got this stable, secure income, and you've trained a total of one dog. So just walk me through the thinking about how that happened, and what was the conversation with Heidi like about?
She was very supportive. My father, who wasn't an entrepreneur, but he was in banking, so he often worked with entrepreneurs in terms of helping them finance their businesses. He was very supportive. My mom always wanted me just to get a stable job, and she was just like, why don't you just go get another good job again? But eventually I won her over. I would say that the first couple of years were challenging, but I managed to earn enough to keep going. I think that that's what did it. And I saw the numbers trend in the right direction, and I really just focused on doing a good job and having people be very satisfied with how their dogs were improving and the relationships they were building. And that I was encouraged when I get referrals. It came pretty early when neighbors would talk to neighbors and suddenly they'd be coming to school. So, because that's the reinforcement that kept me going in the first couple of years. The financial rewards weren't there yet. But seeing referrals, seeing people tell me I did a good job, seeing the slow and steady increase, that acted as the reinforcement to keep on going. And I would say that up until I got to the point where it was time to add an employee or two or three, it was pretty easy to run a one-person shop. I'm a pretty organized person, so managing my own schedule, answering client emails, doing the bookkeeping. If it's just yourself, I thought it was pretty easy, to be honest. The lessons really came as we started to scale up, and that's really stretched my capabilities and where I really need to start looking for outside information to do a good job.
Right. And so you're learning. So how long, so you worked with one behavioralist, and then you're learning about entrepreneurship as well. So if you break those into two different big bucket topic areas,
right?
How long did it take until you felt you were competent in the world of training?
Yeah, that's a great question, especially because dog training is 100% unlicensed and unregulated. So nothing is stopping you from starting a dog training business now and taking money from people.
So getting bitten by dogs.
Yeah, exactly. Or the ethics of, ripping people off and doing a bad job, but that doesn't stop a lot of people, unfortunately. But as for me, as I thought about, all right, it's time to leave tech. Here's an opportunity to try entering a new profession and also being an entrepreneur at the same time. It was around 2009, post subprime mortgage crisis. I did say to myself, well, what qualifies me to take money from people? So I did enroll in a 6-month blended learning online and in-person dog training program. the Karen Pryor Academy, a professional dog training program. And upon graduating that, where my mentor who coached me and observed me in person working with the dogs hands-on sort of gave me his blessings, that was enough validation for me to say, okay, an existing professional has verified that I'm okay. I feel okay to go ahead and start taking money. And I also knew too that because I had the alumni community of Karen Pryor Academy, if I ever got into hot water, there'd be people to ask for help. So that was my decision as to what made me good enough to be a trainer. That I had validation from an expert and a support network of peers to get help from if I got stuck. The other half is about entrepreneurship. And I've always felt pretty comfortable about that. Like I have a business degree, so that certainly helps. So having an undergraduate degree that covers the basics of finance, accounting, marketing, IT, human resources, at least I knew like all the big puzzle pieces.
Those things exist even.
Those things exist, exactly. That I at least know that, yeah, there's this thing called human resources that's important. But does one ever know whether they're competent in that area? I think it's continuous learning, which is why to date, I'm voracious when it comes to that stuff. And it has become a new passion. I love learning about dog training, but I really love learning about entrepreneurship and managing people specifically. I think that's for me, like the final frontier.
That just raises how different or similar is the managing of people and the training of dogs?
In principle, it's very similar because at the end of the day, we're all motivated by carrots and also disincentivized by sticks. That's behavior science. So a lot of the stuff that you read, like a lot of the books that talk about how to manage people, are basically, there's analogies in dog training. Set people up for success. Set dogs up for success. So if you're trying to teach your dog, not to go outside, you're potty training your puppy, take them out a lot. Because if you go out a lot, they're more likely to pee in the right spot, right? Set them up for success.
Right.
When dogs do the behaviors we want, make sure we reinforce them for it. So attention for sure is a reinforcement, praise is reinforcement, and treats and toys and play. So when the good behavior is observed, reinforce. Well, when you catch people in your organization doing the right thing, don't let that go unnoticed. Recognize them publicly, especially because humans are also motivated by recognition of the peers, whereas dogs aren't as much, right? Dogs don't go, hey, look at my owner giving me so many treats. I'm much better than you because you guys aren't earning any treats. Like that sense of, so what is reinforcing is different because humans are a lot more motivated by recognition, fame. Dogs don't have that in their systems of reinforcement. They really just want treats, pets, attention, and toys. But the principle of reinforcement is the same. But then also principles of punishment are also the same as well. Yes, if a dog does something bad that you don't want or do something nasty to them and they flinch and they get scared, that behavior is going to be reduced. They're not going to do it in the future. The same could be said for humans as well, like employees or people you work with. But your employees are also more likely to quit. Your dog is more likely to run away from you if you use aversive training. So in the end of the day, how we train our humans is how we train our dogs. That's why one of our core values is above all positive reinforcement. And it's to remind ourselves that we train dogs with positive reinforcement, but how we work with our clients and how we work with each other in our organization should have as its basis heavy emphasis on positive reinforcement.
And how important is that? Let's actually unpack that in a couple of places, because there's a lot of entrepreneurs who actually feel, there's a saying I've heard in parenting, in dog training, and others, beware what works in the moment, which is that you may get compliance in the short term by using, sort of punitive measures, but the long-term implications of that is negative. And I understand your philosophy,
right?
The dog trainer is very much the positive reinforcement, not punitive styles of training. Is that fair?
That's right. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so as I know entrepreneurs who feel that, sometimes you just got to bring the hammer down. What's your take on that philosophy?
Punishment has fallout and side effects. And that's true. That's true from a behavioral science perspective. Mm-hmm. And I think that the long-term effect of using punishment or heavy-handedness with humans is they quit. And that's the thing about dogs, because we can get away with training dogs or animals that way because they're captive, which is kind of sad and unfortunate. But humans have a lot of choice. Sure, they might need your paycheck right now, so they can't quit in the moment that you were rude or abusive to them, and they may stop or they may stop what they're doing, or they may work harder temporarily. But the long-term fallout of that is a relationship that doesn't work. And the counter saying to that is people don't quit their jobs, they quit their boss.
Right.
So, and that's something that I've had to learn over time, because it's not something that comes natural. And when you're a new entrepreneur, when things go badly, it's easy to get very emotional. And if we're not our best selves, it's easy to take that out on our employees. And we pay the prices for that in the long term, and it's very, very expensive to train up a new person. It's very, very hard to hire new people. So retention of A players should be number one. And that's only done at long term. Keeping an A player for the long term can only be accomplished through using positive reinforcement and having a good relationship with your employees. And I think that in the end, that's the path to long-term profitability.
And part of it, just psychologically, both animals and human beings, the brain doesn't work as effectively when it's in a fear state. Right, it actually starts to shut down. And so compliance actually, or performance rather, is actually much more difficult to achieve if you put people and dogs in a fear state.
Absolutely. They may still go through all the basic motor movements, but you're not going to get creativity or discretionary effort where they just like, I was so excited about this project. I just took extra time this weekend to just think about it. And I want to share with you what I came up with. Like that sort of really, really discretionary effort amongst employees only happens when one, they're free to experiment without fear of ridicule or fear of repercussion, and that you've made the environment as safe as possible. And this is something that, even though I was a positive reinforcement dog trainer, it doesn't come naturally. So definitely in the last 7 to 8 years, as we've grown, like I've had to learn how to really take the principles of positive reinforcement in dogs and truly integrate it into managing people, while still setting things like key performance indicators, performance standards, and objectives, and managing people that would exceed those standards sometimes, but also sometimes not meet them, and work with those people, work with those team members in a way that still preserved the relationship. Or if it wasn't possible, help those people find roles elsewhere that did play to their strengths, because it might have not been a good fit in our organization.
Yeah, that's actually, I've spoken about that in a few places too, that, everybody deserves to be an A player somewhere.
Yeah, it's true.
It may not be possible to be an A player here. I was thinking it's interesting, like in kids sports, there's levels, right? You can be house league, you can be A, B, C level, B level, A level, and you can be the best player at the B level and take all the pride and joy in that, but you wouldn't even make it on the A team.
Right.
But what's wrong with being the best player on the B team? Like
nothing at all,
and then you can have that experience. And so I always try to say that even if somebody doesn't work out in your organization, still treat them with dignity.
Absolutely.
Doesn't mean you have to keep them. Like sometimes in conversations like this, I can hear entrepreneurs going, all this positive reinforcement stuff is nice, but like, does that mean I have to keep people around who are terrible, who don't do a good job? They say, no, you don't. But what you do have to do is treat them with respect and dignity.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, I've gone both ways, or we've gone both ways, our leadership team. Like when we started learning about the importance of creating safe places for our team members where there was emotional security, I think we swung too far, where it's like, oh, we'll work with we'll work with this person who's struggling, this B player, C player, for months or years. And we realized that, maybe at month 3, that was the time to say, the odds of you actually getting to the level we need where you're feeling good and we're feeling good is not going to happen. And exiting the employer relationship earlier would have made sense. So where I'm at now, and the analogy that I use with my team members, because we all talk dog and it helps get us on the same page, is, if someone's looking to adopt a dog and they're a family with 2 young children, and you adopt a dog, and within the first month or 2, it's discovered that this dog actually has a lot of aggression towards children. Like, we wouldn't hesitate to say to that guardian, you know what, this dog is not suitable for this home. We should return it to the rescue, where they can find a home with people that don't have children that come over, find the right lifestyle and home for that dog where they can be successful. So we try to bring that to the table when it comes to evaluating new hires within their probationary period. All right, know really well what is required of this role, and then look for it very closely. And if it's very clear that this person doesn't have it, or doesn't have an interest in developing it, or natural aptitude to it, if that's the non-negotiable, then it's time to rehome them as well. And whether that's attention to detail versus where detail is not important and creative thinking is more important, whether it's confidence speaking in public or whether that's not required or not, really just knowing what the criteria is for success. We do that when we help people find dogs for their homes, right? Must be good with kids, must be good with cats, must be good with dogs. Or maybe that's not important. Know what that is, then we can have the right match that everyone's happy.
And how important this is just a specific dog related question. Is it a mythology or is it true that there are different breeds that are appropriate for different environments or different situations?
There's truth in that. So you look up breed characteristics, and then you're looking at the general sort of traits that were bred for that dog for the original function. So for example, border collies were bred to move sheep around and protect them from predators. So you are likely going to get characteristics of needing to work a lot because they worked on the farm for 8 to 12 hours a day, and they like moving things around. So it's often known that border collies aren't great for busy households with young children because they start moving the children around and nip at their heels like they're sheep. Or in urban environments, they often then don't have a place to herd, like they don't have sheep to herd to fulfill that natural need. So they start developing a car chasing problem. That's an example of a breed characteristic that often presents as maladaptive behavior in those two contexts. However, you may go to a rescue site or go to the Humane Society and see a border collie named Finn, and you may meet Finn, and you may discover this border collie does not express herding tendencies towards dogs or children or cars, and that specific border collie Finn could be perfect in the household with kids. So when making a selection, why not look at breed stereotypes, because that then sort of filters, but you may end up finding like the unicorn of that breed.
Right.
And then they may integrate really well. And that's where I think people get confused, because people will say things like, pit bulls and bully breeds are aggressive towards other animals. And I would say that as a very general breed stereotype, that is true because they were selectively bred for that. However, an individual, myself included, I have a bully breed, he's American Bulldog mix. He's fine with other dogs and animals, but that's his individual expression. So know the breed stereotypes to select, but then ultimately decide when you meet that dog whether that individual has that issue or that expression or not. Now, when you're getting a puppy, you don't know what they're fully formed like. Right. So I think it'd be very foolish to get a border collie puppy and hope and pray they don't herd your kids, because you won't know until they've been in your home for a couple months and now you're in a bit of a pickle.
Yeah. All right. So when Hounds Fly, how many locations do you have?
To date, we are currently operating at 4 different locations in Toronto, from Etobicoke, downtown west, Midtown at Yonge and Davisville, and then we have a training facility on the East End at Danforth and Jones in Leslieville. And then we also have classes running in Vancouver in partnership with a dog daycare in the Mount Pleasant area.
Wow. And so that comprises how many employees?
Currently, we're at about 10 full-time employees and about 10 part-time employees. Full-time employees are a combination of trainers and management, and the part-time employees are primarily part-time trainers.
Yep. And is it what kind of specific systems, for lack of a better word, have you had to put in place? Because you're managing people of different ages and different commitments, both part-time, full-time, at remote locations. So that must present its own unique challenges.
Yeah, we're a highly virtual organization. We always have been. For example, when our classes run at our facilities by appointment, so we don't have like a receptionist. I don't go into the office where I can just bump into my team members in passing. So we really are like ships passing in the night. And that's one of the complaints that some of my team members had in the early days, which is we never actually talked to each other. So I think one of the major systems that we implemented as we really ramped up was meeting cadences and having standardized meetings that really helped bring us as a cohesive team, which are all done on Zoom. Mm-hmm. So we have a Monday all hands meeting where it's Vancouver and Toronto. We have instructors managed in teams of 4 or 5 under a team lead, and each individual team will have meetings to discuss training challenges together. And I have one-on-ones with people in the leadership and operations teams to make sure that we're all syncing. So I would say having those standing meetings with set agendas was really important, and then having a place to hold each other accountable. So we are huge users of Notion as our repository of information. So all our quarterly objectives and our to-dos are stored there, so that as we meet, we can always go back and reference what was agreed upon and whether was it done or not. And that helps keep everyone, including myself, on the right track.
And so what's next for, like, you're at 4+1 essentially? Is that it? Are we growing? Are we going to take over the world of dog training?
We're going to grow responsibly and organically. That's what I've decided. There was a period where I was thinking, how do I 100x this? How do I 10x this? 30 locations by, and I decided that at some point that really wasn't for me.
And what was the criteria? Like what created that decision for you?
So when I went from 2 locations to 3 to 4 to 5, every time I opened up a new location and set up a new team, I basically said, wow, that was really tough. I mean, that was basically it. And then I know that technically the step after that is to create teams that do that for you, right? And then and proceduralize growth as a process. But I also felt like I had enough. I also felt like I was personally happy in terms of how much I was taking home as the owner of this business. My employees were very happy with the stability we had found. When we had grown too fast and had to scale back, including we did one period of layoffs where we laid off 2 full-time team members, that really hurt our team. Mm-hmm. And my team deserve a certain amount of stability, and I didn't want to grow fast and risk the base. So that's where I am today. But again, you could ask me in a year and I may be somewhere completely different. But growing will be organic. So I'm hoping to move west into Mississauga and also north into Markham to start serving communities that are just outside of Toronto, and then really investing heavily in online and blended learning, because I do feel like that's the future. Even if you come to puppy classes down the street, I think a good portion of how you learn should be through homework that can be facilitated through a phone or a computer.
And do you this many years in and this many locations and being on business growth, do you still have the passion? Like in one of our earliest conversations, you said you were really motivated by welfare for the dog.
Yes, that is our number one mission and what keeps us going, and this is what I tell my team too. It's like, why do we grow? Like, why is that important? Well, it's because we meet them all the time. We meet the guardians with the dog that just got bad information early, maybe went to the wrong trainer or just didn't go to any trainer, read the wrong books, saw the wrong video on YouTube, and it's an unregulated industry, so they got the wrong stuff. And now they have a dog that's living a very, very poor quality of life. So growth allows us to reach more people like that early, so that people and dogs have better relationships. And that is our number one motivator that's our reinforcement for all the behaviors we do, whether it's business growth, or doing a great job in the classroom.
No, for people who are listening, I just want to pull out a couple threads out of what I've heard, because I found this actually a really, really insightful conversation, but not in ways maybe that people, I just want to encapsulate it a little bit, because I think you do a lot of things really well. And there's this, like right off the top, your sort of sense of generosity to the other people that you worked with, like this notion of positive reinforcement and generosity of spirit throughout. And then combined with some rigorous business disciplines, like I heard you talk about regular cadence of meetings and strategic planning and thinking about the future and having KPIs and all of that. And I think that what I observe is people frequently fall in one of the two camps, but they haven't figured out how to combine them. Sometimes the high, KPI systems folks think it's all about business and almost adopt a kind of a defensive positioning about that. And then the people who are all about giving and generosity of spirit and all of that feel that structured system approach is antithetical to that ethos. But I love the fact that you've combined both of them. And this is frankly in the work I do, what I try to preach a lot is, you can't make the positive difference in the world if you don't have the skills and discipline to do it. But at the same time, the skills and discipline in the hands of people who don't have the values doesn't actually make the world a better place.
That's right.
I applaud what you're doing. I really respect how you've approached the business from both a discipline standpoint while retaining a philosophical outlook.
Thank you, Warren. I appreciate that. And I think that that's why I'm still excited to do what I do almost 15 years into it.
So 2 last questions that I always ask everybody at the end. Without any false humility, what's one quality of yourself that most contributed to your success?
Curiosity. Curiosity was, could I start a dog training business and get my personal income to the point that I can survive? That was like the first question. And the answer is, I don't know, but let's try. And then another major milestone was, can a business like mine actually support a salaried employee? Like, can a dog training school have an employee that receives a T4? Is that versus contractors? And, is it possible? Let's try. Can I hire, can we train our own people? Because there's no trade school pumping out dog trainers. Can we create our own program that our own homegrown industry, like skills development program to create our future trainers? Can we do it? Is it possible? Yes, it is. Can I hire a general manager and step away from all the day-to-day and just focus on strategy, vision, and marketing and stuff that I'm really good at? Can it sustain it? As for the last 2 years, I'm curious, and I think that that's what keeps me motivated to wake up every day.
And what's one personal quality that you most had to overcome in order to succeed?
Oh, full disclosure, like getting grips with getting a grip on anger and your emotions, because it's scary when you have a major loss month or when something really bad happens. And it's easy to get angry. And when you're angry, when you're triggered, when you're in a fear state or, an anger state, you can't think straight. And all the training in the world about how to manage people properly, how to be a professional goes out the window if you've lost it. So learning how to be in touch with my own emotions and learning how to identify when I'm triggered and developing skills and competencies around maintaining a cool head at all times. That's been the number one thing that the sooner I learn that, the further along I've been able to get. And it's something I work on continuously.
And do you have particular disciplines or practices around that?
No, a number. So some Western, some Eastern.
Yeah.
I am a Zen Buddhist, so I practice a lot of meditation. So my Eastern teacher presents it from that framework, but it complements really nicely with modalities in the East or the West rather, like cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectic behavioral therapy, so CBT and DBT, and also Western practices of really exploring like trauma and how early trauma affects how we think and view the world and how we often automatically respond. So all from a place of curiosity.
Mm-hmm. Nice. That's great. And working with animals must be really helpful for that. Like there's a lot of really interesting work around trauma, like even just how animals process it, right? Like just that the freeze response and then the shake that allows it to get dissipated. And those are just things that we experience shame over and don't actually allow ourselves to just process it through. And that's how it stays stuck. There's a book called The Body Keeps the Score.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
so
like a lot of this stuff stays in the body, but if you can get the discipline of releasing it, then you have more control of your emotions. I actually read a lot of Stoicism, which is very helpful for that kind of thing too, separating that which you can control from that which you can't.
Yeah. It's funny that a lot of the ancient thinkers, the Stoics, Buddhists, like if you read a lot of that stuff, there's so many similarities because at the end of the day, we're all human. We're all the same species. And the challenges of 2,500 years ago are really not that different than today.
Yeah. Yeah. If you actually read the diaries and letters from that long ago, people are struggling with the same. Somebody betrayed me. Can I trust this person? Oh, yeah. I'm dealing with a crisis in the economy, or there's a disease ravaging our community. They're the same challenges.
Exactly.
Good for you. So where can people find you?
Well, if you want to find me personally, definitely look me up on LinkedIn. You can follow me there. I'm on Instagram as well. And on most social media, if you just look for me, Andre_Yeu or Andre Yeu, you'll see me. And in terms of my business, just Google When Hounds Fly and you'll find our Vancouver or Toronto website. And we're also on most social media, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube as well.
And do you have any hounds flying?
I currently own an American Bulldog, currently houndless, but I've had, but beagles will come back into my household in the future for sure.
Well, thanks very much. I really enjoyed the conversation, Andrew.
My pleasure, Warren. Thanks for having me. Great to talk.
Cheers.